was the director of NID for 25 years, and I think he has probably his finger craft on his fingertips and has continued to stay in the craft field.
Thank you, Debbie. My topic is advocating the creative economy. And I think it's pretty fortunate for me that we've had the presentations we've seen this morning, Visalakshmi's work with baskets, what followed in terms of the development activities, and finally what you've just seen, the Kala Raksha, Somaya Kala Vidyalaya experience of Judy Frater. These are critically important because the message that seems to be coming through from all of them, including from what Laila has just explained about the work of Dastakar, is that unless we address the critical issues of livelihood, so much else will fall through the cracks. And I think it's particularly important to bring that issue up here because recently when we had this wonderful experience in Kerala, which Mohan Rao had organized with 300 weavers coming in from all over Asia and interacting, there was not a single reference by any scholar to any of these experiences. And when I raised this with them and thought that this incredible wisdom and knowledge which the scholars from all over the world were bringing to Kerala, and yet our kind of people, if we are one kind of people, were completely left out of the equation. And when I raised this, I was told that people like us, when people like us means Crafts Council of India, Dastakar, Judy other, are engaged with commodification and using artisans as labor, which we understand because that certainly has happened and exploitation has been there. But these incredible experiences that are taking place were nowhere in the consciousness of people writing tomes, doing PhDs, and basically contributing to scholarship. But where on earth were we in this equation? We were not. And then I got this chilling feeling that all these years we have worked on the assumption that scholars are our partners. And then at Kerala, we got a stiff kick in the pants to say, you guys, they didn't say this, but it seemed to be, we can tolerate you, but you're not what is needed. And it seemed to me then that at least for one group of people, in their subconscious, because they're very kind, they listened carefully, but when one probed this, that how is it that none of these experiences in India, and not just in India, but in South Asia and Southeast Asia, are even being mentioned in your presentations? Nothing. No knowledge. And frighteningly, no desire. And therefore, I've come to the conclusion the last couple of months, and I've just written something for my colleagues in the Crafts Council, maybe it's our fault. Maybe we haven't built these bridges and haven't taken this seriously because we have assumed that we and scholars were like-minded people on the same side of this struggle. And then I realized this is a caste system. And the Brahmins are scholars in the great campuses of the world. And we are what? I'm not quite sure. You right? But at Kerala, where Mohan Rao had brought these 300 weavers, the discussion amongst them was about livelihoods and survival for the next generation. That was what was going on in the buzz. Amongst the Indian artisans, what had happened to them in the last 2 years, demonetization, snatching away 2 seasons of sales, after that being hit by a clumsily operated GST central tax system, without even 15 minutes of government time being spent on this sector's issues. Whereas manufacturers of television sets, refrigerators, and you name it, machine-made textiles, were in and out of the finance ministry, being consulted on the impact of tax. Now, this kick in the pants that I got in Chirala was a relatively gentle one, because they were all very nice people and very wise people with huge experience. But a few years ago, now it's almost a decade ago, 2010, we got a much swifter kick in the pants, which was from the highest level of policy making in this country, which described the craft sector, as Laila has just given you a glimpse, as dispensable. And the term that was used was sunset sector. A sunset sector incompatible with India's aspirations of global power. Almost an embarrassment, like snake charmers and maharajas. All right to be trotted out at festivals, all right for museums, but you're not at the heart of anything. This was happening in New Delhi. And those who are in New Delhi are supposedly the heirs to a most extraordinary chapter of human history, which is India's freedom struggle, in which hand production and crafts was at the center of emancipation. Not at the fringe, but at the center. And it was that experience of Rabindranath Tagore, Mahatma Gandhi, Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay, and the other giants that then moved into Free India's attempt at transition from a colonial society, agricultural society, into so-called modernization. And in this transition, crafts was given a central place. The only country to do that anywhere in the world at that time. In the development scenario, crafts was given a central place. What then happened? How we have grown up, my generation has grown up in an India where crafts we have taken for granted as part of our DNA, a part of our environment, a part of our ecology. And suddenly to be told, it doesn't matter. And the suggestion we were given that we who were in the craft sector, instead of running around with arty crafty stories, should be encouraging artisans to go into, guess what? IT. Right? IT gives 2 to 3 million jobs a year. All right? And that statistic then triggered off what was at the heart of this incredible rejection. There is no data on our sector. And yet, even the president of the country, not one but several, have stated that crafts are the second largest source of Indian livelihood after agriculture. Second largest source of livelihood after agriculture, and we don't have the data. And then it turned out that in the world that we now live in, what can't be counted or isn't counted doesn't count. Because at the discussion we were having in Delhi, we were told that this idiotic suggestion of sending them to IT, and then we realized the person who was telling us this had absolutely no idea of the scale and the contribution of this sector to the economy. And it seemed then to me and my colleagues that unless the economic argument is understood, the social, political, environmental, cultural, and spiritual aspects disappear because there's no support for them. Now, whose job is it to come out with these statistics? Clearly, it's the government of India. But we were told that there's no priority for this. If you want to come up with some kind of statistic, you're welcome to. So the Crafts Council of India and its partners, with no economic qualification, another bell rings, like what rang when I was given a kick in the pants in Kerala, which was, how come we've never had a single economist on our team for all the years that we've existed as the Crafts Council of India? And if we hadn't, then whose fault is it? Because if we don't have the statistics, or at least if we haven't been ringing alarm bells, then who the hell should have been doing that? So as the old American saying goes, when you point a finger at your neighbor, the three fingers pointing back at you. So what do? How do you count the scale of the craft community, craft in this country? How do you count it? Who is an artisan? Is the maker of bricks by hand, the maker of pappers that we had just now, are they artisans? Who do you count and who do you leave out? So then it turned out, when we started working with some sympathetic economists who understood our dilemma, that a methodology for assessing the contribution of Indian craftsmanship to the Indian economy does not exist. And no one was going to do the job. So with a small grant from the Tata Trusts, the Crafts Council of India, with partners, economists, went to two places in the country, one in Tamil Nadu and one in Kutch, and came out with a craft economics and impact study, which took us 2 years. Because we ourselves didn't really know what we were doing, and neither did our partners. So we had to struggle. After about 2 years, we brought this back to the Planning Commission, which is where we had been given this kick in the pants. And we said, is this approach valid? Is it robust? And can it be applied on an international level? At which point, we were sent across to the Ministry of Statistics of the Government of India, which at that time was about to roll out the 6th economic census of the country. Fortunately for us, there had been some elections going on and the census had been delayed. So we got our foot in the door in the 6th economic census of India, which for the first time since independence included artisans. But the economic census was counting only those artisans who take their products to the market. In other words, it's an economic census of economic establishments. This was an extraordinarily complicated task because the forms for this census had already been printed. Millions of copies in every Indian language, 16 languages. And they were piled up in the corridors of the ministry. And we were to add one more industry, and one more column, and therefore one more question. All that we were allowed. And that meant millions of these forms would have to be trashed and reprinted. And we were told by our kind mentor in the Planning Commission, when you walk into that office, they'll want to kill you. We walked in this office, and the gentleman there said, I suppose you've been told that instead of shredding these forms, we would like to shred you. He said, yes, we have. I'm on your side, said the Chief Statistical Officer of India. He said, I started my career in Nagaland. I have been worried about this throughout my career. But your job as craft activists will be to train the enumerators to ask that one question with the kind of sensitivity that may be revealing. And we will only stick to the list of crafts that is under the Development Commission of Handicrafts, Government of India. There's no time for anything else. Fine. Interestingly, what is that list? Many great crafts are not on that list. Making kites, January 14 is Kite Flying Day, not on the list. Making chicks, which you know, the blinds, not on the list. Making pots, classic Indian product. At every seminar, we bring the potter, we quote the Rig Veda, and we do that. The potter is not on that list. Because art pottery is on that list. If you put Mickey Mouse on the pot, yes. But no Mickey Mouse, no pot. And so it goes on. That list was created in the 1950s in order to promote exports, and nobody knows that. In order to promote exports, a certain list was created of products which India could sell overseas because it was a protected market in need of foreign exchange for industrialization. Okay? That's the only list the government of India recognizes. Plus, weavers. The official figure is 11 to 13 million artisans. That's not a small figure. But the unofficial figure, 23, 27, 75, 130, and according to the former boss of Microsoft, 250 million artisans. 250 million artisans according to some, and the official figure is 13 million. So you can understand the kind of gray area in which all of us are swimming. What are we doing now? The economic census is conducted. We support it by training enumerators in every state, in every language, to recognize the crafts in their state. The results come out, very interesting, but full of more questions. And the government of India then comes out with an extraordinary promise that what is needed for this sector is a census specific to handmade in India. And our task now, working with the government of India, is to work out what will go into that. Again, definition. What will we actually count if we do a census specific to handmade in India? But there's still research to be done to develop a robust methodology for this census, and that's what we are working on now. And this needs money. And this can only be done by civil society because nobody else is interested. And we are now struggling with the government of India to raise that money to enable us to do the field work, which we will then hand on a plate to the Ministry of Statistics, and then they will go on to what they call a satellite account for the sector. Okay, so that's where we are now in our attempt to estimate the size of this creative economy. But all the time we are also aware that what we are doing, what we are wanting, as you have heard from all the speakers, is not just about statistics. It's about who we are as Indians and who we want to be, where we've come from, where we are today, where we're going. But to answer these kind of questions, at least the economic argument must be made. It must not be ignored. And in order to keep our sensitivity while we are doing these statistical calculations, that's where we need the support of a much larger sector of thinkers and of minds. Because it would be quite possible to then say that the sector's significance comes only from statistical size. We don't want to fall into that trap. We want to say that the size is what is so important, not just in terms of statistics, but in terms of the relevance to a better India and a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Well, we've come more or less to the end of our day, which means the end of our conference. I know that many of us are going down to Mahabalipuram in a little while, a few minutes, and we're going to have our dinner there. Debbie and I discussed this. I've been making notes on the various papers over the last 2 days. It might have been a strategy to summarize these for you, but I must say that the talks, however fascinating each one has been in its own right, haven't led to some kind of a consensus that I could really honestly make in any way. I have taken down the major themes that each person presented, and I'll be happy to put these together with a little more time, which I think it requires, and share that with you. But I won't make an attempt now to summarize the variety and diversity of approaches and experiences that we've heard here, however fascinating and stimulating each one was. So I thank you all for participating. Some of us have come from far away to be involved here. Many people were here 20 years ago when we had the first Maker and Meaning presentation, and I think that surprisingly, but perhaps not, many of the issues remain today almost precisely in the form that they existed 20 years ago. But I also think a lot of progress has been made, and so I simply want to thank all the presenters, and equally all the people who came from outside and from nearby to participate with us and to listen and to discuss with us over the meals and so forth, and particularly the craftspeople who were with us today and who represent in some ways the sector, the issues and the long history that's invested in what all of us have been talking about today. But I'd like to ask, before we split up, all the people who spoke in the conference, I'd like them all to come to the front so that we can have a photograph. I know everybody takes photographs all the time these days, but I think it would be nice to have a photograph of the group of people who spoke here today, just as a document of this experience, the ethnography of this small group being together. That'll be nice too. But before we all go to Mahabalipuram, I'd like to get everybody up to the front who gave a paper. Yeah. I'd also like to say that everybody knows who knows Dakshina Chitra knows that the staff make a terrific contribution to the events that go on here. And I'd like to thank all the staff of Dakshina Chitra, all the volunteers who worked on this, and tell you that every one of us who've come to participate feels very fortunate to have had your support and for this event. Thank you.